Hey guys, and welcome back to Grace of a Military Child and Life podcast. Life from the perspective of a military family member is way different than a civilian standpoint. Military children and family members give up their hopes and dreams to be able to stand by and support their service member, and it isn't an easy lifestyle for anyone to live. I hope that this podcast is able to help connect the military community and give others just a glimpse into what the military life is like from the perspective of spouses and children. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Grace of a Military Child and Life podcast. Today, I'm super excited. I have Mellisa on with me. Mellisa, how are you?
Good. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Thank you for being on. I'm super excited to have you.
Thank you for welcoming me onto here. This is awesome.
Yes, thank you. So start by telling me, because you served as well as your husband. So kind of tell me how that has impacted you, what it's like being a service member yourself and then marrying into the life as well. What's that backstory like?
Oh my goodness. Two totally different experiences, to be quite honest. So after I graduated high school, I actually kind of took a little bit of a year off and not really doing anything but going into the workforce. And that's when I decided to go ahead and go into the Navy. So I served in the Navy. I started out, of course, my boot camp in Illinois. And then I had a specialized school after my initial A school in Washington State. So I ended up with like a certain code that made me more specialized for the job that I was doing. And my first station was actually in Florida.
Yeah.
So that was a really good experience. I've never really been out of California, or at least out of the West Coast, because I was born and raised in California. So out of the West Coast and going into, the East Coast, and a state that is, to me, was somewhat similar to the West Coast, minus the humidity. Oh my goodness, that humidity was crazy. I think that was the first time I've experienced crazy humidity like that. And then sweet tea.
Yes.
That's the first time I've ever had like Southern sweet tea. And it's definitely like one of my favorite drinks.
Yeah, I live in Florida, so I totally understand everything you're saying.
Yes. It's like you take a shower in the morning and you step outside, and all of a sudden you're sweaty.
Yes.
You're so sweaty. Oh my goodness. But it was a really good experience. I was, stationed on a ship there. I have always had a very kind of like a dominant personality. So it was really hard for me to kind of take on what you would call like the submissive role when you go into, the military. Like you have to listen to your chain of command and follow their directions and obviously not ask questions. But it was quite difficult, moving from a dominant personality into what to me just seemed a little bit more submissive. But I ended up getting stationed in Hawaii, and
Ooh.
Yes. And that's actually where I met my husband. We worked we both worked the same job. We were in a shop together doing maintenance on like torpedoes and getting them ready for ships and things like that. So it was pretty cool. But yes, so that's where I met him. And eventually I ended up getting out. So I did just like, one tour. I ended up getting out, and then I became the military spouse. So it was a completely different community. It was kind of hard to break into at first, obviously, because, I'm coming from being a service member, to now being part of the family.
Right.
And then knowing what I knew, being able to serve, and then going in and, just kind of seeing the family side where it's like, you guys aren't given that much information, because it's just for whatever reason, and families are in the dark. So it was quite a different experience.
Yeah.
Yes, but I did, we did make a lot of friends. And one of the things that I highly value is I still to this day have a lot of military spouse friends, and they're my most treasured friends. And they tend to be the closest to me. So I think that, as a military spouse or a part of the military family, you tend to treasure relationships with those who understand what you have been through, because, they've went through it as well. And they tend to be the most lifelong relationships that you can ever have. So so it was amazing.
Yeah. Once you find like your community of people, like I haven't experienced it from the spouse side yet. But I experienced it from the kids side for sure. Like having, my group of military friends that are, going through the same things as me, like experiencing similar experiences. And, you have that community for life.
Yes.
Like I can just call up one of them that I haven't talked to in years and be like, hey, can you help me out with this? And they'll be there in a drop of a dime.
Yes. And you just pick up where you left off. That's
Yes.
the great thing is like you pick up where you left off.
Yeah. And it's like nothing ever happened. There was no time lost or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, and actually one of my really, really close ones, they just retired last year, and they're from Montana, and they've recently just moved to Texas. And it's funny because now they're experiencing Texas and they don't have a clue. But they're closer to me now. So that's amazing, because before it was like Arizona and Montana. And now, it's like Arizona and Texas, like, you're only 12 hours away. I can make that drive.
Yeah. And Texas is such a cool place too.
Yes, it is.
It's
definitely
so different, but it's such a cool place.
Yeah. It's like its own country, I think.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I loved my time living there. It was so fun. So,
oh my God. Yeah. But yeah, so my husband, he actually retired in 2015. So he got in 95, and he's got to experience a lot. Like I've got to experience states.
Yeah.
And of course, St. Thomas, which I love St. love St. Thomas. So I got to experience that. Yeah. But outside of that, he got to go to all these amazing countries like Italy and Bahrain. And there's so many, countries that he got to go experience. And I'm so jealous.
That's when you plan vacations to go back.
Yes. It's more like when my kids get older, they're all teenagers now. So it's like when you're out on your own and, you're good.
Yeah.
That's my time to go ahead and like travel, and I'll be work along the way.
Yeah, for sure. It's so weird kind of doing like that transition from one role in the military and to another role from, in your case, from service member to spouse. Like it's so weird for me right now being child and then like experiencing the spouse side of it. Like my mom will look at me and she'll go like, you now know what I felt. Like you thought it was so bad as a child. And, it's hard. But she's like, now you see how I felt like, as a spouse and the struggles you go through. And so I'm sure it's similar to what you're experiencing as a service member and then a spouse and the different experiences you have both ways.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things, I find is military families, they tend to be so resilient. Mm-hmm. Like they're just so resilient, so determined, and, they can, withstand like changes and then just continue moving forward. And I noticed that in my kids, I have 4. My oldest actually just turned 21 yesterday. So I'm like, so I have, I see it, with my kids and what they've experienced, because all of them, they've all grown up being military brats. Yeah. And I think when my husband retired in 2015, I want to say my oldest, she was probably 14, 15 years old. And then, the youngest, she was 5, so they've all had, certain amount of years, being military brats, and they have experienced, like 2 of them are born in Washington. One is in Hawaii,
Yeah.
one is in North Carolina. And so it's like, they've all been able to, experience the different states and the different bases. And some of them went to school, while we were in the military. So, and they make their friends and they develop those friendships. And then when they move to the newer location, they have to start back all over again. And that right there feeds into that resiliency. It's just like, they know what they need to do. They pick up and they go, and they do it again. And even now it's like, we're not, we're retired, but we still made a cross country trip to, move to Arizona, and my kids, there they are again. They're picking up and, they're starting new schools and, making new friends and powering through it. And I think that what it does is it really develops kind of like a thick skin on kids. So it's like, you really have the power to withstand and experience pretty much anything, because you guys grow up strong.
Yeah, it's so true. And, you can have anything in life face you. And it's like, okay, I've been through all of that. Like, this is not as bad. And it's a weird thing too, to put kids in a position of, like, when you marry, you kind of marry into it most of the time, and you know what you're expecting and you know what you're getting into, or when you join, you know what you're getting into. But when you're born into it, you don't have a choice. No. Your choice is made up for you. So you have to kind of go with it and, like you were saying, be resilient and learn that resiliency and, kind of carry on with whatever life throws at you. And there's some struggles, but, you get past them and you learn lessons from them and you figure it out. And you have a whole world of friends, which is the coolest thing.
Yes, exactly. Plus you get experience so many different areas, like state, and to be quite honest, like different states, they really do have their different cultures. It, no state is similar, well, except, maybe Florida and California, but
right. To some extent.
To some extent, but nothing is similar. Like, people are raised differently. And that's another good thing about, being a military child is, you get to experience that. And if you're one of those lucky ones that get to be based overseas,
yeah.
How cool is that? That's like history lessons, that's like world culture. That's amazing, to be able to experience that.
Yeah. And it's so cool meeting families who have been stationed overseas. And so learning just kind of what they've experienced and, how they continue carrying on a piece of that culture in their own lives too.
Yes. Oh my goodness. One of my really good friends, they were stationed twice in Japan. So
wow.
Both, two different bases in Japan, and both their kids were born in Japan. And like the Japanese have a different way of birthing kids too, so
right.
Experience that. But just the pictures, and everything that they were able to experience. And then I remember, because I met her when I was stationed in Washington, and I remember going to her house and she had these, oh my goodness, she had these like huge, like really big vases. They're like, I don't know if they were Japanese or, because I know that in that area, she was able to travel to the different Asian countries and start collecting all these like wonderful items. Right. And ended up having it shipped, to the States, but her house would have like 4 of them. They were just really tall, like Asian vases, and they were just so beautiful. Just all the stuff that she was able to collect.
Yeah. It's really, I never like kind of imagined being stationed in a place like, because we didn't get that opportunity. My dad was Army Reserve, so we lived in Ohio. He was injured overseas, so we lived in Texas for his recovery, and then he retired and we moved to Florida. So I didn't get to experience like many different bases or anything. I had one. So, but now that my boyfriend's a Marine, his duty station when we first started dating was in Japan. And so it's like, I mean, I didn't get to go over there and visit him, but like listening to him just talk about the culture over there and the different things that they do, and, the way that bases integrate the Japanese culture into, daily lives and things like that. It's so cool to hear that and to see just the different ways that, you can live overseas, but, still be in the States at the same time, technically, too.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Oh my goodness. I don't know. I just think that the Asian countries are amazing, just their, what they have going on for their culture. So have you thought about going overseas or going in, or?
I want to travel. I want to travel the world and just explore everywhere. I've been to Scotland.
Oh, I love Scotland. My friend,
yes.
Her kids were born in Edinburgh.
Yes, that's where we went. Yes, it's so gorgeous over there. My boyfriend wants to take me back to Japan. So he wants to get stationed over there again at some point. He just did a couple years over there, and he wants to be back in the States for a little while. But after that, he wants to try and get back over there at some point, at least to visit. So go back over there, and I just want to go all over the world. There's so much places to explore, and I just want to see it all.
There is, especially when you're so young too. Like, when you're younger,
yes.
Take that time to definitely, explore. Like for me, I have to wait until my kids are old and my life begins, so then I'm able to go ahead and travel around. But you just experience more and you become more worldly, at a younger age. And then you just continue to grow that, as you grow. So it's always good to go out and experience. My brother, when he graduated, I think it was before he went to college, he did a backpacking trip, like a European backpacking trip, like hostels and trains and stuff like that. And that was like before he even went to college, he just graduated high school, and him and a group of friends went over there and they did that. And that's brave, at that age. But he was able to go and experience that. So that's an experience he can carry with him, for life.
Yeah. And I think that's so cool. And that's like, I think the military life kind of in general, like makes you want to travel more. And I mean, I think to an extent too, like you're like, okay, I'm done traveling. Like I would like to be in one place for a little while now. But I think you become this little traveler that you're like, I want to see the world. And, you can see the entire world, being, related to the military, whether that's service member, spouse, or kid, like you can do that. And it's just incredible, the different, places that you can go, and then going on vacation and things like that. Like you grow such more of an appreciation for the places you go.
Yeah. And I think, and growing up in a military family really does instill that kind of like wanderlust. Yes. I feel. Now, I did not grow up in a military family myself, but we were constantly moving. So every, 2 to 3 years, my mom's husband at the time he would get transferred to a new location for his job, or, we would just move to a new place. So we were constantly on the go. I think I went to one high school and one junior high, 2 separate cities. And then my elementary, I think I went to like 3 or 4 different elementaries.
Yeah.
Just constantly moving. So with that and my experience there, it was easy, for me to constantly move when it came to the military. It was just harder trying to ingrain into the community, but it was easy just to kind of get up and go. And then after my husband retired, I think we still moved quite a few times because I'm like, it's time to go. It's time to go. Let's go. We've been here about 3 or 4 years. We're good. Let's go. And then this last one, we just moved here in March, and I'm like, okay, we need to like set down some roots. We're going to stay here. We're not going to, leave the state. We're good. But you might want to ask me in about 3 years.
I've talked to so many people who are like, we at least need to rearrange the furniture every once in a while, because you can't just sit still anymore.
No, it's like, it gets becoming like too routine, too boring.
Yes.
I don't know. You just feel like you need something fresh, something new. Maybe it is let's sell everything and just buy things new. I don't know. But yeah, I get that bug, and my husband's like, oh Lord, here she goes.
There's something going on now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, and being raised like you were, not in the military, but still moving around a lot, that's definitely like, I've heard that before. And then they're like, raising a military family is so easy then, because kind of the experiences and what it's like. I mean, obviously not to the full extent of the military life as it is, but kind of that making new friends and trying to integrate yourself into a new community in a new area. It's so different.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's one of the, reasons why, I initially started like my first company. And the reason for that was to, I guess more so bring to light that, it is hard getting into a new community. So it's like one of the things that I love is actually getting to know somebody, having a cup of coffee or, tea. I drink tea too. Having like a mug of tea. But you really just sit down and get to know somebody. So why not, have like those that have been in the community for the longest, reach out to the new ones that's coming into the community and learn more about them and help integrate them into the, into their new environment. You can get to know somebody so much just by sitting down and having that conversation.
Yeah. And all it takes is like a hello, like welcome, like where'd you come from? Like, type deal. And, that creates a lifelong friendship right there.
It does. Exactly. I will tell you what, the first time I met one of my friends I was in labor. She just I need to go to the hospital. My husband was on duty. Yeah. So that was our welcome to the community, because my other friend who I've known for the longest lived next door, and she was taking care of all of our kids. So it was more like, well, you just kind of drew the short straw. Sorry. But there's so many ways that you just meet your friends, and they tend to be your, like, kind of like your lifelong, just ride or die people. So.
Yeah. And it's so weird, just those little situations. And I think, you tend to trust, the military community a little bit more, where you can just be like, okay, here's, the situation. Like, I don't know how we're going to like get through this, but we're going to get through it and figure it out. And even if you don't know someone, you like trust them so much more.
Yeah. I think the military does come with that, level of trust of somebody else. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's insane because you can't just walk out to the civilian world and be like, here's my kids. Can you take care of them for a second? I'll be right back. Like my mom has left us with people before that we have known for maybe like 2-3 weeks. And, we trust them. Like we trusted that, but you can't do that in the civilian world.
No, definitely not. But you always get those gut feelings about people too, yes. So you always have that gut feeling like this is a good person. This is a good person. Yeah. So it was definitely a really good experience. I actually kind of miss being able to move around a lot, like I said,
Yeah.
And then just miss having that, like the military community environment. I remember when we were in Hawaii, it was just me, my husband, and then our oldest daughter. And we lived in kind of like a cul-de-sac. It was a cul-de-sac. It was military housing, but it was a cul-de-sac. And everybody in the cul-de-sac knew everybody, would watch everybody's kids. We would, just get out into the middle of the cul-de-sac, play bones. We would play that. Music would be going. People would be drinking,
Yeah.
To like all hours of the night. The kids would be riding around with their bikes, and no cars would be coming in because we were all there. And just, having that type of environment. And even in Washington, I didn't live on a cul-de-sac, but all of us, we would get together, celebrate holidays and, birthdays. We would just get together, sit on the side of the street, and the kids are playing. And That actually I really miss, because those are like the best environments. You can go out and you can just spend hours with your friends. And now it's like, okay, I get mine on, FaceTime or phone.
Yeah.
I have to drive. But yes, and it's harder to be able to get that level of camaraderie in the civilian world. Like you don't see that in civilian communities very often. It's very rare. And all the communities that I've lived in, civilian wise, we have not had that.
Yeah, it's definitely like, no matter where your background is, where you've came from, what you've done, you have that family. And as soon as you move into a new house, it's like you've been there for years. And everyone knows each other. Everyone's so welcoming. You're able to do those little get-togethers, like, even randomly. Like nothing has to be planned or scheduled. It's just random happens. And it's so special of the military community.
Yes, exactly. But now I live near a base again. I can still partake of all the different, things that they have, like the commissary and stuff. So I'm like, I love it.
Yes, the commissary in PX is definitely a bonus.
Oh my goodness, such a bonus.
Yes. So the last question that I always ask everyone is, what advice would you give to, in your case, another military spouse?
Definitely know who your people are. Put yourself out there, because if nobody's going to approach you, put yourself out there and start making your core group of people. My thing is like, you don't need a ton of friends or, or acquaintances, as long as you have enough people that you can count on your hand, that you can count on. That really does make it worth it. And when you connect with your environment, like your community, it just makes your experience even better, because you have your core set of friends there. Yeah,
that's so true. Well, thank you. Yes, that is such a big one. Thank you so much for being on and sharing your experiences.
Of course. Thank you for having me on. It was great speaking with you.
Yes. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Grace of a Military Child and Life. Make sure to set a reminder for every Tuesday to listen to a new episode. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube at Grace of a Military Child and Life. If you have any questions or want to be on the podcast, send a message to one of our social media platforms or email grace.of.a.military.child@gmail.com. See you next week.